My parents kicked me out for 3 weeks. They didn't know I was their landlord. You have 3 weeks to get your disgusting lifestyle out of my house. My father's words hit me like a slap across the face as I stood in the living room I'd grown up in, still holding my phone with the photo that had just destroyed everything. It was supposed to be a happy picture, me and my boyfriend Marcus at Sarah's wedding last weekend, both of us in our best suits, smiling like idiots because we'd finally made it official after 2 years together. Dad, please, just listen to me for a second. Don't you dare call me that. His face was red, that vein in his forehead throbbing the way it used to when I'd come home past curfew in high school. 22 years I've fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay me. By choosing to live in sin. Mom stood behind him, tears streaming down her cheeks, but not the kind of tears I'd hoped for. Not tears of acceptance or love. These were tears of disgust, of mourning for the son she thought she'd lost to what she saw as moral corruption. Get out, she whispered, but her voice carried more weight than Dad's shouting. Get out of our house. I felt my chest tighten. 3 weeks. They were giving me 3 weeks to pack up my entire life and disappear because I'd fallen in love with someone who happened to be a man. The irony was so thick I almost laughed, but the sound that came out was more like a choke. They had no idea who they were talking to. Fine, I said quietly, sliding my phone back into my pocket. I'll be gone in 3 weeks. Dad nodded curtly, like he'd just solved some major problem instead of potentially creating a much bigger one for himself. And don't expect any help from us. You made your choice, now live with it. I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom, the same room where I'd spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, knowing I was different but too terrified to admit it. The same room where I'd opened my acceptance letter to Northwestern. The same room where I'd planned out my entire future, including the part where I'd take care of my parents when they got older. That plan was looking pretty fucking complicated now. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder labeled Personal, Confidential. Inside were dozens of documents that my parents had never seen, LLC formation papers, property deeds, mortgage agreements, bank statements showing monthly rent deposits of $1,847 from 2 tenants named Patricia and Robert Chen. Patricia and Robert Chen, who had no idea their landlord was the same kid they'd just disowned. 18 months ago, when Dad lost his job at the manufacturing plant and Mom's hours got cut at the grocery store, they'd fallen behind on their mortgage. The house, our house, the only home I'd ever known, was heading toward foreclosure. I was still a senior at Northwestern then, but I'd been interning at a financial consulting firm and had managed to save up most of my earnings since I was 14. I'd also gotten very, very lucky with some early cryptocurrency investments that I'd made with my 18th birthday money. So when they'd quietly listed the house for a short sale, trying to avoid the humiliation of foreclosure, I bought it. Not as their son Jake Chen, but through Meridian Holdings LLC, a shell company I'd set up with the help of my business law professor. The plan had been simple enough in theory. I'd purchased the house for $127,000, about $30,000 under market value because of their desperation, then immediately leased it back to them at a rate that barely covered the mortgage, property taxes, and insurance. The monthly rent of $1,847 was actually $200 less than what they'd been paying on their original mortgage. I told them their new landlord was a private investment company looking for stable, long-term tenants. Dad had grumbled about becoming renters in our own home, but Mom had been relieved. They got to stay in the house where they'd raised me, kept their pride mostly intact, and had no idea their college kid had just become their financial lifeline. The fake identity had been almost laughably easy to maintain. All communication went through Meridian Holdings' business email account, which I managed from my dorm room. Rent payments were made through automatic bank transfer. When they needed repairs, like when the water heater died last winter, I'd hire contractors and bill it to the company. They never questioned why their mysterious landlord was so responsive and reasonable. I'd been the perfect landlord for my own parents, and they'd been the perfect tenants for their own son. The beautiful part was that I'd actually been planning to tell them everything after graduation. I'd imagined the scene 100 times, surprising them with the deed, explaining how I'd saved their house, maybe even signing it back over to them once I'd gotten established in my career. It was going to be this amazing family moment where they realized their son hadn't just succeeded, he'd succeeded enough to take care of them. Instead, I was sitting on my childhood bed, staring at documents that proved I literally owned the ground they'd just banished me from. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How did it go? Are they warming up to the idea? I stared at his message for a full minute before typing back. They kicked me out. I have 3 weeks. The response was immediate. What the fuck? 3 weeks to what? To find somewhere else to live. They don't want their gay son corrupting their house anymore. Babe, I'm so sorry. You can stay with me until we figure something out. My lease allows roommates. Marcus's studio apartment in Lincoln Park was barely big enough for one person, but I loved him for offering. I'd probably have to take him up on it, at least temporarily. Unless. I scrolled through my emails until I found the original lease agreement. Section 12, subsection C, lease may be terminated by landlord with 30 days written notice for any reason, or immediately for cause including but not limited to property damage, illegal activities, or violation of lease terms. My parents had been model tenants. Never late on rent, kept the property in good condition, no noise complaints from neighbors. I'd have no legal grounds to evict them, and even if I did, I wasn't sure I wanted to make them homeless. But I also wasn't sure I wanted to keep subsidizing people who just told me I was disgusting. Another text from Marcus. Want me to come over? I can help you pack or just be there. No, I typed back. They made it pretty clear what they think of our lifestyle. Probably better if you don't come around. The cursor blinked at me as I stared at my laptop screen. I had about 6 different ways I could handle this situation, ranging from quietly moving out and maintaining the status quo to dropping a truth bomb that would reshape our family dynamics forever. 3 weeks suddenly felt like no time at all to figure out which version of myself I wanted to be. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my parents having their usual coffee and morning news routine downstairs, like they hadn't just blown up our family less than 12 hours ago. The normalcy of it made my stomach turn. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night going through old photos on my phone and staring at financial documents that suddenly felt like evidence in a court case I never wanted to prosecute. By 3 a.m., I'd made a decision. I was going to tell them the truth. By 4 a.m., I'd changed my mind. By 6 a.m., I was Googling how to dissolve an LLC in Illinois. My phone had 17 missed texts, mostly from Marcus but also from my college friends who'd seen my cryptic Instagram story from last night, just a black screen with, "Sometimes family isn't what you think it is." Sarah, whose wedding photo had started this whole mess, had called me twice. I was scrolling through messages when I heard Mom's voice drift up from the kitchen. "Don't know how we're going to tell people. What will they think? They'll think we raised him right and he chose wrong," Dad's voice responded. "This isn't on us, Pat." The sound of my mother's name, her real name, not the Patricia Chen from the lease agreement, made something click in my brain. I pulled up the rental application they'd filled out 18 months ago, the one I'd reviewed as their anonymous landlord. Under emergency contact, Mom had listed her sister Janet with a note: "Sister lives in Phoenix, limited contact due to financial disagreements." I'd forgotten about Aunt Janet. She and Mom had fallen out when my grandparents died and left their small estate to both daughters. Janet had wanted to sell everything immediately, Mom had wanted to keep Grandpa's house in the family. The legal fees from that fight had eaten up most of the inheritance, and they hadn't spoken since. Which meant if my parents couldn't make rent here, they literally had nowhere else to go. The weight of that realization sat on my chest like a brick. I wasn't just their landlord, I might be their only option for stable housing, period. Dad was 57 and had been out of work for over a year. Mom was 54 with a high school education and chronic back problems that limited her job options. In today's rental market, with their credit score still recovering from their previous mortgage troubles, they'd be lucky to find anyone willing to lease to them. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Meridian Holdings had received a monthly rent payment, right on schedule, like always. The automatic transfer had gone through at midnight, which meant I just accepted $1,847 from the same people who told me to get my disgusting lifestyle out of their house. I screenshot the payment confirmation and stared at it. Patricia and Robert Chen had just paid their gay son to keep living in his house while kicking their gay son out of what they thought was their house. A knock on my bedroom door interrupted my spiral into absurdist family drama. "Jake." Mom's voice was smaller than usual. "Can I come in?" "It's unlocked." She opened the door but didn't step inside, just stood in the doorway wrapping her bathrobe tighter around herself. In the morning light, she looked older than I remembered, more fragile. "I made pancakes," she said quietly. "Your favorite kind. With the blueberries." The peace offering hung in the air between us. Mom's blueberry pancakes had been our tradition every Sunday morning since I was 8 years old. They were also what she made when she wanted to apologize without actually saying the words. "Are you apologizing for having a gay son, or for kicking him out?" I asked. Her face crumpled slightly. "I'm apologizing for how we handled things yesterday. But Jake, you have to understand, this goes against everything we believe." "Everything you believe," I corrected. "Not everything that's true." She was quiet for a long moment. "The pancakes are getting cold. I'll be down in a minute." After she left, I closed my laptop and tried to figure out whether I was about to have breakfast with my parents or my tenants. The pancakes tasted like sawdust, but I ate them anyway while Dad pointedly ignored my existence and Mom made nervous small talk about the weather. The whole scene felt like dinner theater, everyone playing their assigned roles in a script nobody wanted to be performing. "Mrs. Patterson next door asked about you yesterday," Mom said, cutting her pancakes into precise little squares. "I told her you were doing well at your new job." "My new job?" "Right. Senior financial analyst at Morrison & Associates, starting salary $73,000, which was more than my parents had made combined in some recent years. Another little detail they had no idea would be relevant to their housing situation. "What are you going to tell her now?" I asked. Dad's fork clattered against his plate. "We'll tell her you moved out. People move out. It's normal. And if she asks why, that's not her business." His voice had that final, conversation overtone. But Mom kept going, because she always did when she was nervous. She mentioned her nephew is looking for a roommate downtown. "Nice boy, works in accounting. I could get his number." "Patricia." Dad's use of her full name made her stop mid-sentence. It also made me nearly choke on my orange juice, because hearing him say the name from the lease documents felt like worlds colliding. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus: "Talk to my landlord. You can definitely stay here while we figure things out. No rush." I stared at the message, thinking about how Marcus's landlord, a retired teacher named Mr. Rodriguez, had been more welcoming to his tenant's boyfriend than my own parents were to their son. There was probably a lesson in there somewhere about chosen family versus blood family, but I was too tired for philosophy. "I need to make some phone calls today," I said, standing up from the table. "Start figuring out my living situation." "Good." Dad didn't look up from his newspaper. "Sooner you get settled somewhere appropriate, the better." Appropriate. Like there was an appropriate way to be gay, an appropriate way to love someone, an appropriate way to exist in a world that kept moving the goalposts on acceptance. I was heading back upstairs when I heard Mom's phone ring in the kitchen. "Oh, hi Janet." Mom's voice immediately shifted to that fake cheerful tone she used for difficult conversations. No, everything's fine here. How are things in Phoenix?" I froze on the stairs. Aunt Janet, calling out of nowhere after 2 years of silence. "What? When did this happen?" Mom's voice went sharp with concern. "Oh honey, I'm so sorry. Of course you should come stay with us while you recover." My stomach dropped. I crept back down a few steps, trying to hear more. 6 weeks. Maybe 8. Mom was saying. "No, don't worry about imposing. Family is family. We'll make it work somehow." I heard Dad's chair scrape against the kitchen floor. "Who's staying with us for 8 weeks?" Janet fell down her apartment stairs. Broke her hip and her wrist. She can't manage on her own while she heals, and she can't afford one of those rehab facilities. "Pat, we barely have room." "She's my sister, Robert. What else am I supposed to do?" Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Dad running his hands through his hair, his stress gesture. "Where's she going to sleep?" Jake's room will be empty, but the insurance only covers so much. If she can't contribute to household expenses. The irony was suffocating. They were worried about money while sitting in a house they got to live in below market rate because their gay son had saved them from foreclosure. And now they wanted to house Mom's sister in the room they just kicked that same son out of. We'll figure it out, Mom said firmly. Janet would do the same for us. Except Janet wouldn't, and we all knew it. Janet had made it clear during the inheritance fight that she considered Mom and Dad financial disasters waiting to happen. I pulled out my phone and quickly Googled average rent Phoenix, Arizona. The results made me whistle under my breath. If Janet was coming from Phoenix's rental market to small-town Illinois, she was going to be shocked at how good my parents had it here. She was also going to be staying in my childhood bedroom, sleeping under a roof that I owned, while I crashed on my boyfriend's futon. This was getting complicated fast. I spent the rest of Sunday researching everything I could about Aunt Janet's situation while listening to my parents scramble downstairs. By evening, I'd painted a pretty clear picture of what was coming. Janet's apartment complex in Phoenix had already started eviction proceedings before her fall. Apparently she'd been behind on rent for 3 months after losing her job at a medical billing company. The recovery period Mom was planning for wasn't just about Janet's broken bones, it was about Janet having literally nowhere else to go. The family financial disasters were multiplying exponentially, and I was sitting at the center of all of them with a laptop full of solutions nobody knew I had. Monday morning brought a new wrinkle when I overheard Dad on the phone with someone from his old plant. No, I understand the position was filled, he was saying, his voice carrying that careful politeness of someone who'd made this call too many times. If anything else opens up, yes, you have my number. I was getting dressed for my second day at Morrison & Associates when I heard Mom's frustrated sigh from their bedroom. The insurance company says Janet's coverage won't kick in for rehab until she's been hospitalized for at least 72 hours, she told Dad. But the hospital wants to discharge her tomorrow. So she comes here tomorrow instead of next week. Robert, we can't afford to feed another person for 2 months. We're already stretching everything. I paused with my tie half knotted. They were already stretching everything, even with below-market rent and no mortgage payments. Dad's unemployment had run out months ago, and Mom's 28 hours a week at the grocery store barely covered utilities and food. The responsible thing would be to quietly pack my stuff and disappear into Marcus's studio apartment, maybe send them an anonymous gift card or something to help with Janet's expenses. Keep being the invisible benefactor, just from a different address. But I was finding it really hard to feel responsible toward people who'd called my life disgusting. My phone rang as I was walking to my car. Unknown number with a Phoenix area code. Hello. Is this Jake? This is Janet, your aunt. Patricia gave me your number. I nearly dropped my keys. Aunt Janet. Hi. Mom told me about your accident. Listen, kiddo, I know things have been complicated between your mom and me, but I want you to know how grateful I am that she's letting me stay with you all. And I promise I won't cramp your style too much. Your mom says you're doing really well for yourself these days. The words, cramp your style, would have been funny if they weren't so loaded. Janet had no idea she was about to be staying in the room of the nephew who'd just been disowned for being gay. Actually, Janet, there's something you should probably know before you get here. I found myself explaining the whole situation, the photo, the ultimatum, the 3 weeks notice. Janet listened without interrupting, which was more than my parents had managed. Jesus Christ, she said finally. Pat kicked you out for being gay. In 2023. Dad was the one who actually said it, but yeah. Mom went along with it. And they're putting me in your room while you're homeless. I'm not homeless. My boyfriend has a place. That's not the point, Jake. Janet's voice had gone sharp in a way that reminded me she'd been a paralegal before the medical billing job. The point is they're prioritizing my comfort over their own son's basic acceptance. I pulled into the Morrison & Associates parking garage, not sure how to respond. Here's what's going to happen, Janet continued. I'm going to come recover at their house because I literally have no choice. But I'm also going to spend those 6 weeks explaining to your parents exactly what kind of backwards idiots they're being. Janet, you don't have to. Honey, I've got nothing but time and pain medication. Trust me, this is going to be therapeutic. Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from Mom that made everything exponentially worse. The realtor called, she said without preamble. Someone's interested in making an offer on the Henderson place next door. I was sitting in my new office, trying to focus on a client's portfolio analysis, but the familiar street name made me look up. An offer. I thought Mrs. Henderson was just thinking about selling. Apparently she got serious fast. The realtor says there's been a lot of investor interest in our neighborhood lately. Cash buyers looking for rental properties. Mom's voice carried that particular anxiety that came with change happening too close to home. She wanted to know if we'd heard anything about our landlord's plans. My coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. What do you mean? Well, if the whole street's turning into rentals, property values are going to shift. She was wondering if Meridian Holdings might be looking to sell too, especially if they could get above market value. The irony was suffocating. My mother was worried that her mysterious landlord might sell the house out from under them, while simultaneously housing her sister in the room of the son who actually owned the place. What did you tell her? That we have a good relationship with our landlord and we're hoping to stay long-term. But Jake. She paused, and I could hear her moving around the kitchen. What if they do sell? Dad's still not working, and with Janet's situation, we can't exactly afford to move right now. I stared at my computer screen, where I had Meridian Holdings bank statements pulled up in another window. The account currently held $23,847 in rent payments that I'd been saving to eventually use for a down payment on my own place. Money that was technically profit from renting to my parents below market rate. Have you thought about talking to the landlord directly? I asked carefully. Maybe explaining your situation. We've never actually spoken to anyone from the company. Everything goes through email and automatic payments. Very professional, but not exactly personal. Professional. Right. Because I'd specifically structured it that way to avoid exactly this kind of conversation. Besides, Mom continued, what would we even say? Please don't sell because my husband can't find work and my gay son just moved out and now my sister's moving in. That's not exactly a compelling case for keeping stable tenants. The casual way she mentioned my sexuality, like it was just another family inconvenience alongside unemployment and medical emergencies, made my jaw clench. Mom, about the gay son thing. I can't talk about that right now, Jake. I have to pick Janet up from the airport in 2 hours, and Dad's trying to move furniture around so she'll have space for her walker. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone for 10 minutes. Then I opened my laptop and drafted an email from Meridian Holdings LLC to Patricia and Robert Chen. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Chen, we hope this message finds you well. We've been extremely satisfied with you as tenants and want to assure you that we have no current plans to sell the property. We believe in long-term, stable rental relationships and appreciate your reliability over the past 18 months. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any concerns. Best regards, Meridian Holdings Property Management. I read it 3 times before hitting send. Within an hour, I got a response from my mother's email address. Dear Meridian Holdings, thank you so much for reaching out. This is very reassuring during a difficult time for our family. We truly appreciate your understanding and look forward to continuing our rental relationship. We've always felt this company treats tenants with respect and fairness. Gratefully, Patricia Chen. The phrase, treats tenants with respect and fairness, hit me like a slap. Apparently, I was a better landlord to my parents than they were parents to their son. That evening, Marcus came over to help me pack boxes. We were in my room, wrapping up books and old college supplies, when we heard Janet's voice carry up from downstairs. So let me get this straight, Pat. You kicked Jake out for being gay, and now I'm sleeping in his bed. Janet, please. It's more complicated than that. No, honey, it really isn't. The argument downstairs was getting louder, and Marcus kept glancing toward the door with increasing concern. Maybe I should go, he whispered, taping up another box of my college textbooks. This feels like a family thing. You're my family too, I said, probably louder than I should have. The voices downstairs went quiet for a moment before Janet's laugh cut through the silence. Was that the boyfriend? She called up. Bring him down here. I want to meet the man who stole my nephew's heart. Marcus went pale. Jake, I don't think. Absolutely not, Dad's voice boomed from the living room. I will not have that lifestyle flaunted in my house. Your house. Janet's voice pitched higher. Robert, you don't own shit. You're a renter, same as me, except at least I'm not kicking out family members for who they love. I grabbed Marcus's hand and squeezed. Through my bedroom window, I could see Mrs. Henderson next door peeking through her curtains. The whole neighborhood was probably getting an earful of the Chen family dysfunction. Janet, please, Mom's voice was strained. You just got here. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder than it has to be. Pat, you made your son homeless because he's happy. How much harder could it possibly get? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Mrs. Henderson next door. Is everything okay over there? Should I call someone? I showed the message to Marcus, who just shook his head. Your family is really going through it. Another crash from downstairs, followed by Dad shouting, that's enough. This is still my house, and I won't be disrespected in it. Actually, Dad, I said, appearing in the living room doorway with Marcus behind me, it's really not your house. The room went dead silent. Janet was standing by the couch with her walker, still in her airport clothes. Mom was hovering near the kitchen like she wanted to escape. Dad was red-faced and pointing at nothing in particular. What did you just say? Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I said it's not your house. It's mine. Jake, don't be ridiculous, Mom started, but I held up my hand. Meridian Holdings LLC. Ring any bell? Your landlord for the past 18 months. I turned the phone screen toward them, showing the email chain between Patricia Chen and the property management company. The one who bought this place when you were facing foreclosure. The one who's been charging you below market rent. The one who fixed the water heater in January and never raised your rent once. Janet's eyes went wide. Holy shit. Language, Mom said automatically, then seemed to realize what I just told them. Jake, that's not, you can't be. I walked to my laptop bag and pulled out a folder of documents. Deed of sale, dated March 15, 2022. Purchase price $127,000. Buyer, Meridian Holdings LLC, registered owner Jake Chen. I dropped the papers on the coffee table. Your rent payments go into my business account. When you needed the bathroom faucet fixed last summer, I hired Peterson Plumbing and paid them $340 out of my own pocket. Dad sank into his recliner like someone had punched him. This is impossible. You were still in college. You didn't have that kind of money. Cryptocurrency investments, plus every penny I'd saved since I was 14. Plus a very motivated seller who needed to close fast. I looked directly at him. Ring any bells, Dad? Marcus squeezed my shoulder. Babe, maybe we should. No. I shook my head. They want to talk about respect. About this being their house. Let's talk about it. I pulled out my phone again and opened my banking app. Your rent payment of $1,847 cleared yesterday morning. 12 hours after you told me to get my disgusting lifestyle out of your house. I turned the screen toward them. You literally paid your gay son to live in his own house while kicking your gay son out of what you thought was your house. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Janet was the first one to speak. Patricia, your son just told you he saved your house, and you're sitting there looking like he confessed to murder. I don't understand, Mom whispered. Why didn't you tell us? I was planning to. After graduation, I was going to surprise you with the deed. Maybe sign it back over to you once I got established. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Funny how things work out. Dad finally looked up at me, and for the first time since this all started, he looked uncertain instead of angry. So what happens now? Dad's question hung in the air like smoke. What happens now? I've been asking myself the same thing for 3 days, and I still didn't have a good answer. Now you have a choice to make, I said, closing my banking app. You can apologize for kicking out your landlord and try to salvage whatever's left of our relationship. Or you can keep being homophobic tenants, and I can start shopping around for new renters who won't call my lifestyle disgusting. Mom made a sound like she'd been slapped. Jake, you wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Evict tenants who create a hostile living environment. Mom, if you were renting from anyone else and told them their gay son wasn't welcome, how do you think that would go? Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside me. Maybe we should give them some time to process this. Process what? Janet interjected, maneuvering her walker closer to the coffee table to get a better look at the documents. That their son is a goddamn financial genius who saved their asses. Pat, this boy kept you from being homeless, and you thanked him by making him homeless. Dad stood up abruptly, his face cycling through about 6 different emotions. You manipulated us. You've been lying to us for over a year. I've been helping you for over a year, I shot back. Do you know what market rate rent is for this neighborhood now? Mrs. Henderson's been asking around because she's thinking about renting out her basement apartment. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. You'd be paying at least $2,300 a month, assuming you could even qualify with Dad's employment gap and your credit score. The number hit them like I'd thrown cold water. Mom actually staggered back a step. $2,300, she whispered. Plus utilities, plus deposits, plus application fees. Janet, what were you paying in Phoenix before you got evicted? Janet didn't hesitate. $1,850 for a 1-bedroom shithole with no air conditioning. The math was written all over Mom's face. They'd been paying $1,847 for a 3-bedroom house with a yard, while Janet had been paying nearly the same amount for a studio apartment in Phoenix. I'd been subsidizing their entire life, and they'd responded by telling me I wasn't welcome in it. I need some air, Dad said suddenly, grabbing his jacket from the closet. This is. I can't think with everyone yelling. Robert, don't you dare walk away from this, Janet called after him, but the front door was already slamming shut. Through the window, I watched him get in his truck and drive off, probably heading to Murphy's bar like he always did when family stress got overwhelming. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was running away from the house his son owned to go drink beer he couldn't really afford. He'll be back, Mom said quietly, but she didn't sound convinced. My phone buzzed with a text from my boss. Great work on the Morrison analysis today. Client was impressed. Can you handle the Patterson account tomorrow? Big opportunity. The Patterson account. Mrs. Patterson next door, who'd been asking Mom about me yesterday. The same Mrs. Patterson who'd probably heard every word of tonight's screaming match through the thin walls between our houses. I have to go, I said, suddenly exhausted. Marcus, can we? Of course. He was already grabbing my jacket from the chair. Mrs. Chen, Janet, we'll see you around. Jake, wait. Mom's voice stopped me at the door. Where are you staying? I know you said Marcus has a place, but why does it matter? Because you're still my son. The words should have felt like a relief, but they just made me tired. Am I? Because 3 days ago I was an abomination who needed to get his disgusting lifestyle out of your house. Tears started rolling down her cheeks again. I never said abomination. You didn't have to. Dad said it loud enough for both of you. Janet cleared her throat. Pat, honey, I love you, but you fucked this up real bad. This boy saved your entire life, and you threw him away because he fell in love with someone who makes him happy. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Janet's voice was firm. It's exactly that simple. I left them in the living room and drove to Marcus's apartment, my head spinning with everything that had just exploded. The documents were still scattered across my parents' coffee table like evidence in a trial nobody wanted to be having. 20 minutes later, sitting on Marcus's tiny couch with a beer I couldn't taste, I got an email notification on my phone. It was from Patricia Chen, sent to Meridian Holdings LLC. Dear Property Management, there's been a family emergency and we may need to discuss our lease terms. Please advise on policies for additional occupants and potential payment modifications. Urgently, Patricia Chen. I stared at the email for a full minute before I realized what she was doing. Mom still didn't fully believe that her landlord and her son were the same person. She was hedging her bets, trying to secure her housing situation while the family imploded. Which meant I was going to have to decide whether to respond as Jake the disowned son, or as Meridian Holdings the business entity. The funny thing was, I wasn't sure which one would be more honest. I stared at Mom's email until my eyes went blurry. She was trying to negotiate with her own son through a fake business entity, asking for lease modifications from the same person she just told wasn't welcome in her house. The cognitive dissonance was almost impressive. Marcus handed me another beer and settled beside me on his cramped couch. You going to respond? I don't know. If I respond as Meridian Holdings, I'm continuing the lie. If I don't respond, she's going to panic about losing the house. Or, Marcus said carefully, you could respond as Jake and tell her to figure it out herself. My phone rang before I could answer him. Dad's number. Jake. His voice sounded hollow, like he was calling from inside a tunnel. We need to talk. I think we covered everything already. No, we didn't. A pause, then the sound of background noise that definitely wasn't Murphy's bar. I'm at the bank. I just spent 2 hours going through our account records, trying to figure out how you pulled this off. My stomach dropped. Dad. The rent payments. They've been exactly $423 less than our old mortgage payment. Not $420, not $425. $423. His voice cracked slightly. That's not a coincidence. He was right. When I calculated their rent, I'd specifically set it at exactly what they could afford based on their unemployment benefits and Mom's part-time wages. I'd even factored in Dad's monthly prescription costs and Mom's car payment. You knew everything, he continued. Our entire financial situation. What we could handle, what would break us. A long silence. Jesus Christ, Jake. You saved us, and I called you disgusting. Through the phone, I could hear traffic sounds, which meant he was probably sitting in his truck outside First National, having some kind of breakdown in the bank parking lot. Dad, where are you exactly? Trying to figure out how to apologize to my son for being an ignorant piece of shit. His voice was rough. The kid who saw his parents about to lose everything and fixed it without us even knowing. Marcus squeezed my shoulder, but I barely felt it. In 22 years, I'd never heard my father admit he was wrong about anything. The man who'd screamed at Little League umpires and fought with insurance companies and never backed down from anything was sitting in a bank parking lot calling himself ignorant. Jake, are you there? I'm here. I need you to come home. Please. We need to. I need to try to fix this. Dad, I don't think. Bring Marcus. The words came out like he was forcing them through broken glass. I want to meet him properly. I want to apologize to him too. I looked at Marcus, who'd gone completely still beside me. We'd been together for 2 years, and my parents had never once asked about him, never wanted to meet him, never acknowledged he existed until 3 days ago when his existence became the reason I was getting kicked out. You sure about that? No. But I'm sure that I've been an asshole, and I'm sure that my son deserves better than that. Dad's voice strengthened slightly. And if Marcus makes you happy, then I need to figure out how to be okay with that. After I hung up, Marcus and I sat in silence for several minutes. That sounded promising, he said finally. That sounded terrifying, I corrected. My dad doesn't do emotional revelations. He does angry ultimatums and silent treatments. People change, babe. Do they? Because 3 hours ago he was calling my lifestyle disgusting, and now he wants to have dinner with my boyfriend. But even as I said it, I was thinking about those rent calculations. Dad was right, I'd known their exact financial situation down to the penny. Not because I'd been spying on them, but because I'd grown up watching them stress about money every month. I'd known exactly what they could afford because I'd spent my childhood listening to them argue about mortgage payments through these same thin walls. Maybe Dad was having his own revelation about how much I'd been paying attention all along. My phone was buzzing with notifications as Marcus and I drove back to my parents' house. 3 missed calls from Janet, 2 from Mom, and a string of texts that made my stomach churn. Emergency at the house. Dad collapsed when he got home. We're at St. Mary's Hospital. Please come. Mom. He's okay, just exhaustion and stress. But Jake, he keeps asking for you. Janet. The doctors want to keep him overnight for observation. His blood pressure was 180/110. Mom. Marcus was already turning toward the hospital before I finished reading them out loud. Jesus, babe. Do you think the stress of finding out about the house? I don't know. But I had a sinking feeling that my dramatic revelation had just sent my 57-year-old unemployed father into some kind of medical crisis. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid by keeping it secret in the first place. St. Mary's emergency room was the same place I got in stitches when I was 12 and fell off my bike trying to impress Jenny Martinez from down the street. The smell of disinfectant and the fluorescent lighting brought back memories of Mom holding my hand while they cleaned a cut on my forehead. Now I was holding Marcus's hand while we approached the reception desk, and I had no idea what we were walking into. Room 247, the nurse told us after checking her computer. But visiting hours end at 9, so you've got about 40 minutes. We found Mom and Janet in the hallway outside Dad's room, both looking exhausted. Mom's eyes were red-rimmed, and Janet was slumped in her wheelchair. Apparently the walker had been abandoned in favor of hospital transportation. How is he? I asked. Physically. He'll be fine. The doctor says it's stress-induced hypertension. They gave him something to bring his blood pressure down, and they want to monitor him overnight. Mom stood up from the plastic chair she'd been occupying. Emotionally. He's a mess, Jake. He keeps saying he gave his son a heart attack. He didn't give me a heart attack. Not you. Him. He thinks the shock of finding out about the house caused this. Janet shook her head. I told him that's ridiculous, but he's convinced he's dying because he was a shitty father. Through the partially open door, I could see Dad lying in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. He looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with the medical equipment attached to his arm. Can I talk to him? Mom nodded. He's been asking for you every 10 minutes since we got here. I squeezed Marcus's hand. Give me a few minutes. Dad's head turned toward me as soon as I walked in. His face was gray, and there were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there this morning. Jake. Thank God. His voice was hoarse. I thought, when the chest pain started, I thought I was going to die before I could fix this. Dad, you're not dying. The doctor said. I know what the doctor said. But Jake, lying here for the past 3 hours, all I could think about was that the last thing I said to my son was that his life was disgusting. His eyes filled with tears. 22 years of raising you, and that's what I might have left you with. I pulled the visitor's chair closer to his bed. But it's not the last thing. You called me. You asked me to come home. Home. He laughed bitterly. I told you to get out of my house, and it turns out it was your house all along. Do you know how that feels? Finding out your kid has been taking care of you while you were treating him like shit. Dad, I wasn't trying to make you feel bad. I know. That's what makes it worse. He struggled to sit up slightly. The nurse said you brought Marcus. My heart started pounding. He's in the hallway with Mom and Janet. Good. I want to meet him before they discharge me tomorrow. I want to apologize to both of you. Dad's voice steadied. And Jake? I want you to come home. Really home, not just visiting your tenants. Dad. I'm canceling the eviction notice. Whatever bullshit 3-week deadline I gave you, it's off the table. He reached for my hand. I can't promise I'm going to understand everything right away. This goes against how I was raised, what I was taught to believe. But I can promise I'm going to try. Looking at my father in that hospital bed, gray-faced and hooked up to monitors, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. I didn't want to be his landlord. I wanted to be his son. The question was whether he could learn to want a gay son as much as I wanted a father who didn't think my life was disgusting. The next morning, I was sitting in Dad's hospital room with Marcus and a cup of terrible cafeteria coffee when Dr. Martinez came in with his discharge papers. Blood pressure's back to normal ranges, she said, checking his chart. But Mr. Chen, I'm serious about stress management. What happened yesterday can't become a pattern. Dad nodded, but I could see him stealing glances at Marcus, who was quietly reading something on his phone in the corner chair. They'd barely spoken beyond awkward hellos when visiting hours started at 8 a.m. Doctor, Dad said as she was leaving, hypothetically, if someone wanted to make major life changes to reduce stress, how quickly could they do that safely? Depends on the changes. Why? Dad looked directly at me. Because I think I've been living wrong for a while now, and I want to fix it before it kills me. After Dr. Martinez left, the three of us sat in uncomfortable silence until Marcus finally spoke up. Mr. Chen, you don't have to force anything because of what happened yesterday. Jake and I can figure out our own living situation. Marcus. Dad's voice was stronger than it had been since his collapse. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you love my son? The directness of the question made both Marcus and me freeze. In 2 years together, no one in my family had ever asked Marcus anything personal, let alone something that loaded. Yes, sir, I do. And you make him happy? I hope so. Dad was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Jake's been different the past couple years. Lighter, I guess. More confident. His mother and I, we thought it was just college, or the new job. He looked up at Marcus. But it was you, wasn't it? Marcus glanced at me uncertainly. I think we make each other happy. Good. Dad's voice was gruff, but not hostile. That's what matters. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Janet wants to talk to you. Says it's urgent. Something about Phoenix. I showed the message to Dad, who frowned. What about Phoenix? No idea. But knowing Janet, it's probably complicated. We were interrupted by a knock on the door. A woman in a business suit walked in, looking official and slightly out of place in the medical setting. Mr. Chen. I'm Sarah Wilkins from Morrison & Associates. I apologize for interrupting, but there's been a development with your property that requires immediate attention. My blood went cold. Morrison & Associates was my employer, but they also handled real estate law. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. I'm sorry, which property? Dad asked, though his eyes were already shifting to me. The residence at 847 Maple Street. We represent Meridian Holdings LLC in several matters, and we've been contacted by the city planning department about a zoning dispute that could affect the property's rental status. The room went dead silent. Sarah Wilkins had just connected dots that nobody was supposed to be able to connect. Morrison & Associates knew Jake Chen worked for them, and now they apparently knew Jake Chen owned property through Meridian Holdings. Ma'am, I said carefully, I think there might be some confusion. Actually, Jake, there isn't. Sarah's expression was apologetic but firm. Mr. Patterson called our office this morning. He's concerned about the property values on Maple Street, and he specifically mentioned that his neighbors the Chens might not be aware their landlord is facing a potential zoning violation. Marcus grabbed my arm. Who the hell is Mr. Patterson? Mrs. Patterson's husband, I said weakly. The neighbor who was asking about me. The walls were closing in fast. Mr. Patterson had somehow figured out the connection between Meridian Holdings and the Chen family, and he called my employer about it. Sarah Wilkins was standing in Dad's hospital room, essentially outing me as the mysterious landlord to my own father while he was still hooked up to heart monitors. Jake, Dad said slowly, do you want to explain why your boss is here talking about our rental situation? Before I could answer, Sarah continued, the zoning issue is time sensitive. The city received a complaint that 847 Maple Street is being used for multifamily housing without proper permits. Apparently someone reported that there are now 4 adults living in a single-family residence. 4 adults. Me, Mom, Dad, and Janet. Someone had called the city to report my own family for violating occupancy limits in my own house. And I was pretty sure I knew exactly who that someone was. My hands were shaking as I processed what Sarah had just told us. Someone had reported my family for having too many people in the house, a house I owned, in a neighborhood where I'd grown up, reported by someone who clearly knew enough about our situation to cause maximum damage. Who filed the complaint? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. Sarah consulted her tablet. The report was anonymous, but it was filed at 8:47 a.m. this morning with very specific details. The complainant knew the exact names of all 4 occupants and mentioned that one of them had recently moved in under what they called suspicious circumstances. 8:47 a.m. That was 23 minutes after visiting hours had started at the hospital, which meant someone had been watching the house, noticed we were all gone, and decided it was the perfect time to strike. Dad struggled to sit up straighter in his hospital bed. Jake, what does this mean for us? It means, Sarah said before I could answer, that the city has 48 hours to inspect the property and determine if it's in violation of single-family zoning ordinances. If they find that 4 unrelated adults are living there. Wait, Marcus interrupted. Unrelated? Jake is their son. But according to city records, the property is owned by Meridian Holdings LLC and rented to Patricia and Robert Chen. There's no documentation showing a family relationship between the tenants and the property owner. Sarah looked apologetic. From the city's perspective, this looks like an illegal boarding house situation. The irony was suffocating. I'd created the shell company to help my parents, and now it was being used against them. The very anonymity that had allowed me to save their house was about to get them evicted from it. My phone rang. Mom's number. Jake, thank God. Are you still at the hospital? Yeah, what's wrong now? There's a man here from the city planning office. He says he needs to inspect the house immediately, and he's asking all sorts of questions about how many people live here and whether we run a business out of the basement. Mom's voice was getting higher with each word. Janet tried to tell him she's just visiting, but he says that doesn't matter if she's been here more than 14 days. Mom, Janet just got there yesterday. That's what I told him. But he says someone provided documentation showing she's been receiving mail here for weeks. My stomach dropped. Janet had been having her disability benefits forwarded to Mom's address since her eviction proceedings started in Phoenix. Technically, she'd been using 847 Maple Street as her legal residence for almost a month, even though she'd only physically arrived yesterday. Put him on the phone, I said. Jake, you can't. Mom, put him on the phone. Now. There was some muffled conversation, then a man's voice came on the line. This is Inspector Rodriguez with City Planning. Who am I speaking to? Jake Chen. I'm the son of the tenants, and I'm also an employee of Morrison and Associates, which represents the property owner. Mr. Chen, are you currently residing at 847 Maple Street? The question was a trap. If I said yes, then there were definitely 4 adults in the house. If I said no, then I was admitting I'd been kicked out, which would contradict the family relationship that might be our only defense. Inspector Rodriguez, I think we need to schedule a formal meeting to discuss this situation. There are some property ownership issues that need to be clarified before any violations are assessed. Mr. Chen, this is a routine inspection based on a complaint. I just need to verify current occupancy. In the background, I could hear Janet's voice, routine my ass. Someone's trying to screw over this family, and you're helping them do it. Sarah Wilkins was taking notes on her tablet, and Dad was staring at me with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Marcus had gone pale, probably understanding better than anyone how quickly this could spiral into a complete disaster. Inspector, I said, making a decision that was either brilliant or catastrophically stupid, I'm the owner of the property. I'll be there in 30 minutes to discuss this with you directly. The silence on the phone lasted about 5 seconds too long. You're the owner. I thought Meridian Holdings is my company. Jake Chen, sole proprietor of Meridian Holdings LLC. I looked directly at Dad as I said it. Those aren't tenants in my house, Inspector. That's my family. The silence in the hospital room after I hung up was deafening. Dad was staring at me like I just confessed to murder, Sarah Wilkins was frantically typing notes on her tablet, and Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. You just told a city inspector that your parents are your family, not your tenants, Sarah said slowly. Do you understand the legal implications of that statement? I understand that someone is trying to destroy my family, and I'm not going to let them hide behind bureaucratic technicalities to do it. I was already grabbing my jacket. Dad, I have to go deal with this before it gets worse. Jake, wait. His voice was stronger than it had been since yesterday. If you go over there and tell them the truth about owning the house, what happens to us legally? Sarah looked up from her tablet. If Jake acknowledges that he owns the property and you're his parents living there as family, then it's not a rental situation. But that means you've been making payments to your son for 18 months, which could look like financial abuse, I finished. Or elder exploitation, depending on how someone wants to spin it. The pieces were clicking together in my head, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. Someone had figured out the connection between Meridian Holdings and my family. Someone who knew Janet's living situation, knew about the rent payments, knew enough details to cause maximum legal chaos. And someone who timed this perfectly for when we were all emotionally and financially vulnerable. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope your family enjoys their new living arrangements. Some people need to learn there are consequences for their lifestyle choices. A concerned neighbor. I showed the message to Marcus, whose face went dark. Jake, this isn't just about zoning violations. Someone's targeting you specifically. Mr. Chen, Sarah said, I need to ask you directly, have you been charging your parents rent while claiming them as dependents on your taxes? Because if the IRS gets involved in this, I haven't claimed them as dependents. They file their own taxes, and yes, they pay rent. Below market rate rent for a house I saved them from losing. I was getting tired of explaining this. Everything we did was legal. Legal, yes. But potentially problematic if someone wants to make an issue of it. Sarah closed her tablet. Jake, I need you to understand something. Morrison and Associates can't represent you in this matter because it creates a conflict of interest. You're our employee, but we also handle property law for several clients in that neighborhood. My stomach dropped. Are you saying I'm on my own? I'm saying you need independent legal counsel, and you need it today. She headed for the door, then paused. And Jake? Be very careful what you tell that inspector. Once you make statements on the record, they can be used against you in ways you haven't considered. After she left, Dad struggled to sit up in his hospital bed. Jake, how bad is this really? I looked at my father, pale, exhausted, hooked up to monitors because of stress I'd caused, and tried to figure out how to explain that we were potentially facing a nightmare scenario where good intentions had created a legal minefield. Dad, worst case. The city could fine us for zoning violations, the IRS could investigate our financial arrangement, and whoever's doing this could file a complaint claiming I've been financially exploiting you and Mom. I sat down hard in the visitor's chair. We could lose the house anyway, just in a much more public and humiliating way. Marcus squeezed my shoulder. Or we could fight back. Find out who's behind this and prove they're harassing your family. Dad was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. Then he looked directly at me. Jake, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Yesterday I was ready to throw you out of my life because of who you love. Today someone's trying to destroy our family because they hate who you are. His voice got stronger. I'll be damned if I'm going to let some coward with a phone and a grudge finish what my own ignorance started. Dad. No. You saved this family once already. Now it's my turn. Dad was discharged an hour later with strict instructions about stress management that we were already violating by rushing home to deal with Inspector Rodriguez. But as we pulled into our driveway, I realized the situation had escalated beyond a simple zoning complaint. There were 3 vehicles parked on our street that didn't belong, the city inspector's white sedan, a police cruiser, and a black SUV with county plates that made my stomach drop. Jake, Marcus said quietly, why are there cops at your house? Before I could answer, Mrs. Henderson came hurrying over from next door, still in her bathrobe despite it being nearly noon. Oh, thank goodness you're back, she said, slightly out of breath. Jake, someone called the police about a disturbance at your house. They said there was screaming and threats of violence. When? We've been at the hospital all morning. About 20 minutes ago. But here's the thing, I was in my garden the entire time, and it was completely quiet over there. Just your mother and Janet talking to that city inspector. Mrs. Henderson lowered her voice. Someone made a false report. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Someone had called in a fake domestic violence report, knowing it would bring police to the house while the city inspector was there. It was a perfect storm designed to make us look like an unstable household while we were already under investigation for zoning violations. We walked into chaos. Inspector Rodriguez was in the living room with a clipboard, while Officer Martinez was trying to calm down Janet, who was in her wheelchair gesticulating wildly with her good arm. Mom was hovering by the kitchen, looking like she might pass out. "There's my landlord now," Janet announced loudly as I walked in, then caught herself. "I mean, there's Jake. Who is definitely not our landlord because that would be weird, right?" Inspector Rodriguez looked up from his clipboard. "Mr. Chen, I presume. We need to clarify some conflicting information I've received." Officer Martinez approached me with the tired expression of someone who'd clearly realized this call was bullshit. "Sir, we received a report of threatening behavior at this address, but everyone here says it's been calm all morning. Do you know anything about domestic issues in this household?" "Officer, the only domestic issue we have is family members learning to communicate better," I said carefully. "No violence, no threats." "That's what I figured." He closed his notepad. "But I do have to ask, there seems to be some confusion about who actually lives here. The inspector has questions about occupancy limits." Inspector Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Mr. Chen, earlier you claimed to own this property through Meridian Holdings LLC. But the rental payments I'm seeing suggest a landlord-tenant relationship with your parents. Which is it?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Dad was still pale from his hospital stay, Mom looked terrified, and Janet was watching me with the intense focus of someone who'd been a paralegal and understood exactly how badly this could go. "Inspector, it's complicated," I started. "No, it's not," Dad interrupted, speaking for the first time since we'd arrived home. "Jake, tell him the truth. All of it." I looked at my father, the man who'd called my lifestyle disgusting 4 days ago and was now telling me to be honest with a government official who could fine us into bankruptcy. "Inspector Rodriguez, 18 months ago I purchased this house to prevent my parents from losing it to foreclosure. I've been charging them below market rent while living here as their son. Yesterday we had a family disagreement, and I briefly moved out. This morning someone who clearly knows our personal business filed false reports trying to get us in trouble with the city." Inspector Rodriguez made several notes. "So you're saying this isn't a commercial rental situation?" "I'm saying someone is weaponizing bureaucracy to harass my family, and I want to know who filed that original complaint." "Mr. Chen, that information isn't." "Actually," Janet interrupted from her wheelchair, "I think I know exactly who it was." She was holding her phone with a satisfied expression. "I've been doing some digging while you were at the hospital. Turns out our concerned neighbor has been busier than we thought." She turned her phone screen toward us, showing what looked like a social media post. "Richard Patterson, Mrs. Patterson's husband, posted this on the neighborhood Facebook group at 8:30 this morning, successfully reported the illegal boarding house situation on Maple Street. Time to clean up our neighborhood and get rid of undesirable elements." The room went dead silent. Mr. Patterson had essentially confessed to filing the complaint, and he'd used language that made his real motivations crystal clear. "Janet," I said slowly, "please tell me you screenshot that." "Honey, I screenshot everything." I also found 3 more posts from the past week where he specifically mentions the gay agenda infiltrating family neighborhoods and property values declining due to moral decay. She scrolled through her phone. "This isn't about zoning violations, Jake. This is about Richard Patterson not wanting gay people in his neighborhood." Officer Martinez looked at Inspector Rodriguez. "Sounds like harassment to me. False police reports, discriminatory complaints." "Officer, we can't prove the complaint was false," Inspector Rodriguez started. "Actually," Mom said quietly from the kitchen doorway, "we might be able to." She was holding a piece of paper. "This came in today's mail. Richard Patterson sent us an eviction notice." I stared at her. "He sent you what?" "An eviction notice. Claiming we violated our lease terms by harboring individuals engaged in immoral behavior and giving us 14 days to vacate." Mom's voice was shaking. "Jake, he thinks he's our landlord." The absurdity of the situation would have been funny if it weren't so malicious. Richard Patterson had been so convinced that some anonymous LLC owned our house that he'd literally tried to evict my parents from property he didn't own. Dad started laughing, a rough, exhausted sound that made everyone turn to look at him. "Let me get this straight," he said, still chuckling. "This asshole has been planning to kick us out of our own neighborhood, so he filed fake complaints and tried to evict us from a house he doesn't own, not knowing that the gay son he's targeting actually owns the house and could evict him right back if his property is in the same LLC portfolio." "Dad, I don't own the Patterson house." "No, but I bet you know who does." Dad's eyes were getting brighter. "And I bet they'd be very interested to know one of their tenants is filing false police reports and harassing neighbors." Janet was already typing on her phone. "Property records for 851 Maple Street show, oh, this is beautiful. Richard Patterson is renting from Hartwell Property Management." She looked up with a grin. "Jake, didn't you say Morrison and Associates handles real estate law? Including property management companies?" The room suddenly felt electric with possibility. Richard Patterson had just handed us everything we needed to destroy him legally while proving our housing situation was legitimate. Inspector Rodriguez was looking increasingly uncomfortable as he realized he'd walked into a neighborhood harassment case disguised as a zoning complaint. "Mr. Chen," he said finally, "I think we need to reschedule this inspection until after the police finish investigating these harassment allegations." As the inspector and officer left, promising to follow up on the false reports, I found myself standing in my living room with my family, all of us together under my roof for the first time since this nightmare started. "So," Janet said cheerfully, "who wants to help me draft a complaint against Richard Patterson for harassment, filing false reports, and attempting to illegally evict tenants from property he doesn't own?" Dad was already reaching for his reading glasses. "I thought you'd never ask." 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my childhood bedroom, officially back home, reading the letter that had arrived that morning from Hartwell Property Management. "Dear Mr. Chen, we are writing to inform you that Mr. Richard Patterson's lease at 851 Maple Street has been terminated effective immediately due to violations of our harassment and good neighbor policies. We sincerely apologize for any distress caused by our former tenant's actions. Additionally, we would like to discuss purchasing 847 Maple Street for our rental portfolio if you're ever interested in selling. Best regards, Jennifer Hartwell, property manager. Marcus looked up from his laptop, where he'd been working at my old desk. So Patterson's definitely out. Evicted as of yesterday. Turns out Hartwell Property Management takes a very dim view of tenants who file false police reports and try to illegally evict their neighbors. I folded the letter and smiled. Mrs. Henderson says the moving truck left at 6 a.m. The past 2 weeks have been a whirlwind of legal meetings, family conversations, and what Janet kept calling the most satisfying comeuppance in Henderson family history. Apparently she and Mrs. Henderson had become fast friends over their shared love of neighborhood gossip and legal drama. The harassment charges against Patterson were proceeding through the courts. The city had not only dropped their zoning complaint but officially apologized for the misuse of municipal resources in pursuit of discriminatory harassment. And Inspector Rodriguez had personally called to tell me that my family's living arrangement was completely legal and that he'd be flagging any future complaints about our address as potential harassment. But the real victory had been smaller, more personal. Jake, Dad's voice came from downstairs. Can you and Marcus come down here for a minute? Your mom and I want to talk to both of you. We found my parents and Janet in a living room, the same room where everything had exploded 2 weeks ago. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. We have something for you, Mom said, holding out an official-looking document. I recognized it immediately, the deed to 847 Maple Street. But something was different about it. Mom, what did you do? We had a lawyer help us draft this properly, Dad said. Jake, this house is yours. It always has been, really. But now it's official, and there's no shell company, no fake rental agreement, no confusion about who lives here or why. I looked at the deed more carefully. Instead of Meridian Holdings LLC, it was made out directly to Jake Chen, with life estate reserved for Patricia Chen and Robert Chen. It means, Janet explained, that you own the house, but we get to live here for the rest of our lives if we want to. No rent, no landlord-tenant relationship, just family. But the mortgage payments are gone, Mom said softly. Jake, you bought this house for us. We're not paying you rent to live in a house you saved. That was never right. Dad cleared his throat. And Marcus, we want you to know that you're welcome here too. For as long as you and Jake want to stay. Marcus's eyes went wide. Mr. Chen, that's incredibly generous, but nothing, Dad interrupted. You're part of this family now. You make Jake happy, and that makes you our family too. I stared at the deed in my hands, legal proof that I'd gotten everything I'd ever wanted. A house that was truly mine, parents who accepted me and the man I loved, and a family that was finally, genuinely whole. There's just one condition, Janet added with a grin. I get to stay in Jake's old room until my hip heals. Deal, I laughed, pulling Marcus closer to me. Welcome home, babe. Dad smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him since this whole thing started. Welcome home, son.